Thank you very much. We are in the last part of our program. Let's carry on with the presentation on results of this great SustainLuum team. I would like to introduce the panel now. Laura, please. We have Gloria Marina Godínez Ramírez, General Director of and Head of SustainLuum. Carlos Alberto Francisco, which is a senior expert in development of financial mechanisms from Sustain as well. And Danae Neri, that is the climate change coordinator from SustainLuum. Please go ahead. Thank you again, and this is our second project, and we will be closing after this. Obviously, I'm just to accompany the experts here. Something that I forgot to mention in the morning was the implementation of this regulation by the European Union, if it gets to be global, for the project of climate change dialogues, socialization of this regulation. It was only made in Mexico. I would like to give a round of applause to Javier, even though he's with his phone, because he's a mastermind of this. I mean, that was not me, that was him. And he had this vision. And as Ambassador mentioned in the morning, if it's going to be effective on January 1st, we will see what's going on and what's going to happen. I want to have that vision. And again, thinking about Javier, about socializing with this and involving about how to know. And I thank a doctor as well, because it allowed us to socialize and to have a great scope in online. I will not give more background. That's the only thing that I wanted to mention. And I go straight to pass the floor to the SustainLuum team. And thank you, because both of them have been here with us with these documents. So we have three main objectives. That is to facilitate the integration of a platform liaison between the European Union and Mexico for these dialogues in general. The objective is to create the integration of a platform for promoting the effective implementation of the EUDR in free deforestation products. I think this is something that we have achieved widely, and I only talk about the critical mass. If we have to make T-shirts because we're sustainable, I mean, that's something that we would have with different people participating in this, to identify the key factors in the value chain of regulated products, analyze its implications of this implementation. Here, they will present this, but they got very detailed to each of the products, and that's something that I think it's very valuable, and it was socialized with you. We will have a following quick panel with the experts. Well, most of them are experts from the providers that are participating in the value chain and the actions for cooperation. So this is important because to make this emphasize on that they are potential. Each country at the end, and I say it here with the dialogues on climate change, they all have that responsibility. So fortunately, Mexico has this plus of socializing, this understanding. Javier has clarified different doubts that came up. So what's the limit of the regulation to evaluate? I mean, That's, but well, I think that would be enough. On my behalf, I will pass the floor to my colleague, so please. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you to share with all the team, with all the audience, and for all the people that are the experts here and the ones collaborating with all this feedback in order to identify these disparities with implementation of the free deforestation products in supply chain. So I will gladly present our findings, and I will also start with the results of how we carried out our 3 dialogues that started from February and allowed us to, for the SustainLuum team, and that we are here right now to integrate all these recommendations in the different elements of the objectives that have been assigned thanks to the European Union and thanks to Laura Vallejo, that was part of all these coordinations. And it is always at the end the most grateful to Javier Rivas, the minister that had always been with us with the resolution of all questions and doubts that came up during all the process for dialogues for getting to have these 2 deliverables that were these analysis of what are the implications and what were the challenges and the recommendations. How do we expect we're going to focus on these results in the recommendations? That it's a key part of this in order to link them and take them with the key stakeholders.
Well, the first dialogue had a lot of representation, and we want to thank everyone who was there and that continued with us for the closure of this process of the project. We were able to have 69 different participants from several areas from the chain of value, which is very important for the application of these regulations. We know that regulators are also very important from Semarnat. With the support of all of you, with the team of the Dr. Sol Ortiz and the CONAM team as well, that provided recommendations and also provided some advices for challenges, as well as the operators and the merchants that are the main people implied in this. And well, we also want to thank the ECOM team that's here with us and that will provide us their closure recommendations precisely to be able to expedite these and to bring this collaboration to better terms and all of the challenges that are still applied in the regulations. The first dialogues were focused on processing all of the regulations. It's a document that has several elements. Article number 3 for compliance to avoid deforestation, and the other articles that talk about the due diligence. We had an opportunity to discuss the institutional framework from Mexico and how the different areas and non-regulating areas, as well as the collaboration with Semarnat, SADE, UNAFOR, is very relevant to be able to maintain this type of collaboration so that we can facilitate the application of this regulation. Also, we were performing analysis focused on the 7 commodities that are the ones regulated to be able to identify the criterion one and regarding exporting and to be able to have other 4 products relevant for Mexico, but that are not regulated yet, that could be and are of interest and are within the information of the analysis. The second dialogue that we were able to take over in the city of Yucatan, we focused on the areas for compliance of the regulation, and we had the chance of having 67 participants on site and a relevant participation from the chain of producers and cooperatives or the commodities that we are trying to aim to regulate. So we were able to identify the challenges and the information available uh, with the supply chain so that we can foster traceability. And we also find all of the different findings of the commodities and the raw materials and the relevant products. We also found the parcels and land issue where we can find a great challenge for producers and small producers in the chain of value to be able to comply with this requisite. This second dialogue also focus on the transparency mechanisms so that we can have all this traceability of the information that we call the due diligence, which is the core, as it was mentioned before, to be able to identify and participate on this, that these raw materials will be free of deforestation. We also had the chance to identify these different opportunities with the gaps of collaboration between institutions, and we can foster our recommendations there as well. And the third dialogue, we also carried that out in Casalam, and we focused there on the tools, the measures, and the good practices. We presented the main findings, and there we had some clarifying about questions, requisites for due diligence, the terms of what these justification of legal matters for compliance in the country, the assessment from the risk assessment, the criteria for the benchmarking. And here in the tables that we held, we had different good practices for certification models and several applications that could be a tool for us to support producers on implementing the due diligence and traceability that is a key for justifying this geolocation of these commodities. And well, as a part of this information, the dialogues and how they were carried out, all the presentations and results of these analysis is in our landing page. This is www.sustainluum.org. And you can have a look at it, and these would let us to have this key information and a tool to support implementation at the different stages that the supply chain is at. And as a part of this methodology, I would like to share with you the methodology that we carried on for that analysis of implications. And the methodology actually, well, those steps were carried out jointly with each of the expert and participants of a dialogue. They gave us their time so we could have several meetings, on-site meetings and virtual meetings, where we exchange our main findings and also integrated their feedback. So the analysis and methodology will be carried out in 4 main stages. These analysis of each one of the requirements for the EUDR so that we can identify the core of these regulations, all of the articles that are binding from there, and the due diligence 9, 10, and 12, and the references of the commonly asked questions that we also were able to raise some additional questions, and the experts of the European Commission helped us with this so that we could further assess what we will mention as recommendations. During the stage number 2, we're able to identify this relevant part of the raw materials and products that are regulated and how this is represented in terms of importing and exports from Mexico to the European Union and vice versa. And we also analyze the risks that may occur regarding the supply chain. We identified findings mainly for the sector of coffee and cocoa. And we were also able to have the feedback from the producers of palm oil, they have fewer relevance in terms of import and export. And for the compliance of the EUDR regulation, well, we focused on these findings to be able to transform these into recommendations. And these recommendations are a part of the compendium and the closure that we will be presenting today, and that will be shared afterwards with references and perspectives on the panel that will continue after this. And well, I want to show you the main articles of the EUDR in which we base on our analysis. And I want to ask Dananeri from SustainLuum that will support us with the description of this upcoming section. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. We will continue this part, which is stage 1, regarding an analysis from Marina. Well, for this first analysis, we were able to identify which are the key articles of the regulation that will find these requirements, these core requirements for the regulated actors, which are the operators and the merchants. So the Article 3 is the one that rules and mentions these 3 key aspects, which is that the products must not come from any land that has went on through deforestation or any type of forest damage, or that are not totally aligned to the laws of the producer country, such as Mexico, in terms of forest regulation, environment, climate, residue management, etc. They have to be entirely aligned to the regulations of the country of origin. And well, the next one that in which we have found a lot of opportunity areas is the part of the product being backed up by a due diligence that allows them to have this traceability of the product and prove the different requisites. And well, the Article 8 is the one that mentions this document of the due diligence that states this traceability and needs to have 3 general elements that are described in Article number 9, 10, and 11. Article 9 allows us to identify the specific requirements for description of the product, the country of origin, the risk level of the country. That is also stated in the regulations to identify if this country will have low, mid, or high risk, to be able to define which level of due diligence will be identified with it. And also the part of the geolocation, which are the key part of these products coming from certain plots of land. And knowing if this is a forest product or a farm product, in the case of the farm products that are handled. And well, Article 10 is the risk assessment mentioned in the Article 3 and 11, that we identify that this product complies or not with these regulations, and we need to know which measures will be taken and which measures will be applied to production to avoid the situation from continuing to happen. This process is done annually. And also, well, some of the matters that are left outside the reach or the scope of the EUDR, something that has come up as questions in the dialogues that Marina mentioned, such as land ownership. This is a specification. I mean, it's not required to present a document about the use of the land that specifies that the plot of land is destined to fulfill those kind of purposes according to the EUDR. So the classification of areas, the first areas from natural disasters. We need to know if this land has gone through a degradation process, but if it happened because of deforestation reason or natural reason. So if it's a natural disaster, there's no problem in terms of degradation. And the period that the regulation is considering, it's from 2020, so that they can review if this land went through a natural disaster that resulted in deforestation or degradation processes. And the third part is the record and control of the polygon productivity to avoid frauds. Sometimes the plot of land that it's geolocated and there can be one or products that are posing any risk. So this is the definition on how we would have to cover those cases. Here we have the main part of what we were able to extract. And this is article number 3 that mentions that the product should come from a deforestation land, that it abides or Mexican regulations, and that the products are backed up by the due diligence. Here we have a very valuable instrument about this process of due diligence, which is an instrument that should be updated annually. And here we can see the 6 main steps. The first stage is about identification and cross components of this product that will help us to define the chain of value, the product, the amount, the conditions in which it's being exported. And then we have the second part, which is the identification and risk assessment. Then the third step that goes to the risk reduction in case we identified a risk. There's still a chance to be able to heal that risk. And if possible, then the fourth step, which is the mitigation of risk or damage. Once we established those stages of risk mitigation, then the fifth stage would be mitigation of the risk, where you would take action and follow up to those measures. That's a continuous improvement of this management process. And this has a focus of continuous improvement. And as I mentioned, this has to happen annually. Now I will stop to give a floor to our expert, Carlos, which is the environmental economy and the relevance of the products. Well, I will just show you a slide trying to summarize the importance of these products and economic terms, and you will be able to find more information on the site for each one of these products at a national level. So the first point that we wanted to highlight before describing the data that you're able to see on the slide is that unfortunately, we don't have an information source locally or nationally that allows us to analyze the imports and exports information according to the classification of commerce between Europe, Mexico, and the rest of the world. So we had to consult an international source. This is a source from the European Union, and we verified this data with some producers and important characters nationally, so that we could make sure that this data was correct and accurate. So the first point we have here is the percentage of the commodities compared to the European Union. So we can see that this represents only 0.04% of the total of the imports that they take to their territory at the European Union. And from this point of view, we can say that it's very small. We would have a very moderate impact because of these numbers. And we can see what represents in Mexico that is destined to the Union, this product. So the total percentage is 4.3%, which is greater compared to the imports to the European Union. And in products, we can see two scenarios. In the absolute numbers, we can see that there's product like livestock or rubber derivatives or woods that have a monetary absolute amounts. And the landscape changes when we see the percentage of it. Coffee, it's 27%, or palm oil, 16%, but the absolute percentage is a smaller market. This doesn't mean that there's not an impact on the implementation of these policies, but we had to show in the report that many of the markets, such as the one that I pointed out today, are growing and they could be seen as reduced because of the implementation of these policies. So from what my colleague said, it's very important to continue with the process of verification analysis to continue commercializing these products. So that's it from me. And the report that we created has a greater detail about this commercialization of these products and how they are distributed regionally, which is the important part as well in terms of deforestation topics. And well, focusing on this relevance of the seven commodities, I will mention the challenges we identified at the report. 15 challenges or main implications. You will see them into detail along with its recommendations. For this presentation, we are focusing on the prioritarian ones. We selected only 5. And well, these also connect with our recommendation and the perspective of the different actors, regulators, associations from commodities, so that from their perspective, they can also share with us which other recommendations, additional recommendations can be made, especially for collaboration and following up. We know that the EUDR is there and it will be applicable from December 31st, 2024. So we consider that it's a key, and knowing the perspective of the dialogues and the recommendations, and the main participants can speak on their behalf and making reference to their cases so that we can strengthen this collaboration and keep these actions continuity. The most relevant challenge is the requirement of geolocation of plots of land and polygons as well, from which these raw materials are generated, the 7 commodities. There is a challenge there when we think about the technology that can be used. And we also know that there's a lack of reference, different platforms that can be used for these geolocation purposes. Another key point that we identified is all of the development and how to strengthen this chain of value. We know that the operator and the merchant will be applying these, but there's also a supply chain, and knowing how it's relevant to strengthen it so that it can be integrated along with the elements that make this due diligence. It's a key also to have different criteria that are more tangible about the specific references that will be required to document and prove the legal state of these products in their country of origin. And another key reference is that we identify this lack of capacities in terms of infrastructure and also lack of knowledge and experience, so that we can strengthen those supply chains. These are chains that have implications not only nationally, but they are chains that are diversified and that are international, and these makes a bigger risk. We will hear about that topic as well. And another key point is that some of the elements for accuracy and veracity for the evidence that will be presented as in the package of due diligence. I will go to the integration of recommendation and these potential cooperation actions, the perspective from the design and the compendium, focusing on identifying which are these cooperation actions between regulators, operators, producers, different associations that represent the commodities that are needed so that this implementation can be streamlined and we can solve those challenges. So for this stage of recommendations, one of the main ones is the need of technical assistance. Technical assistance with an expertise level that it's relevant because of the detail that this EUDR is requesting in terms of geolocation, and that this could strengthen all of the requirements, not only for geolocation and references of evidence for the compliance of the law in Mexico, but also to be able to develop an institutional integration of the customs offices in Mexico in the case of from the body of customs and the member states that are going to be involved in these costs so that we can prevent and identify it in case there's a lack of compliance or the requirement of the due diligence before this commodity or product or this raw material reach the European Union. So we identified that it's a key to strengthen the platforms of containing information. And as my colleague Carlos Francisco said, to integrate information and to be able to perform a study of the relevance of the commodities, we had to go and request this information from the European Union. So this is a relevant opportunity to strengthen all of these information systems in Mexico, not only the forest national system, but also the systems that use different institutions in Mexico. And we can have a reference and we can help producers so that we can integrate all of these requirements to this. The other recommendation that is key is focused on the development of capacities. What we identified here is a big need of training, computer science, and handling the equipment that they will be able to use so they can perform this geolocation of their plots of lands, and that they can share this information and compare these for different scales. Another key element is the development of capacities in terms of customs to be able to comply with the UDRs and apply this due diligence to the different actors that support the chain, and not leave these only to the merchant operator. So it's a key also to clarify and specify what those requirements will be from the UDR, like transparency, or when will this pre-consultation will apply for several projects, and to say what are the implications and to which projects are these are applicable regarding Mexican regulations. Another key element, and it's also connected to the land ownership, is that one of the elements, as Dana was saying, it's the country benchmarking, where when we will define, let's say, if all of them will have a standard level of risk, and then it will be further assessed. And we are making a recommendation that to assess this risk level, that Mexico can be or can develop a very direct relationship with the Commission of the European Union that is working with these assessments so that they can create a pilot with the criteria that will be used to classify it, and then we can be more prepared to meet this requirement of the country benchmarking so that we can have a right assessment, and this will also help us so that this integration and this strengthening from the institutional authorities in Mexico with all of their requirements and the implementation with group work for implementation. So we are hoping to get these. We've been very interested in this and to follow up these recommendations. It's a priority. And we will hear about these for the next panel. Another key aspect that I was mentioning is that in the previous session, of course, we require a resource investment to be able to apply these recommendations to and be able to strengthen the small producers that have these needs of technical equipment and capacities, and to have access to platforms that allow us to manage information for due diligence, as well as in the cases in which they may need a certain type of assessment or audit and manage the risk with the scheme that I was mentioning about due diligence, how to map it, and the plan of risk management. And the key part here is that we identify that in the group, the producers of the main commodities in Mexico, coffee and cocoa, are going to be needing that support from us because they are the more vulnerable in terms of the application of this regulation because they are small producers. So we have to keep an eye on it, and all of the products that can come from for the implementation of these and strengthening of these regulations has to focus on the small producers. They are the ones that we are trying to stop them from leaving that value, that chain of value that it's currently commercializing with the European Union, and they can meet the requirements.
I will go to the next phase. Here we'll share of the collection of good practices. It's a tool that we compiled for supporting these stakeholders and to complement the recommendations that I mentioned. And Dana will help me with this. Thank you. Here to describe a little bit about what you're gonna find in this second deliverable, that it's the compilation of good practices and tools. The objective is to identify what are these institutional acts and certification schemes, tools, and other good practices that may contribute to the compliance of the requirements of the regulation in front of what we already have or what's been already used and what we are working with already in Mexico. Here, what we identified is that from the Ministry of Agriculture that has now two very well-aligned programs from the Organic Seal in Mexico and the Amigable con la Diversidad program in Mexico. So from this point, we are taking reference because they are also deriving a geolocation tool that will help to integrate products like coffee, but also widening it up to other commodities in the future. On the other hand, we also have some institutional actions that are now integrated as this project that is called Canare, along with the Mexican Fund for the Restoration of Nature. And within the certification schemes, we have the Forest Stewardship Council and the Rainforest Alliance. So we will also find these ones in detail, and we are describing them as the alignment level with the regulation. The commodities are considered that are part of their scope, the territory scope in Mexico to which they are available, the boundaries in economic terms, also the necessary specifications for their use, or any other opportunity area that may be important to align them to the requirements of the EUDR. With these geolocation tools that we integrated to the ones that we are already checking from these dialogues with the colleagues from the organizations like NUC with their tool called Sirio, Imicadev with their Bring Me Bridge to Zero, the organization that has their own assessment risk tool, the tools that I mentioned from the Ministry of Agriculture, the AMECAFE, that it also has its own geolocation tool, completely defined, that it's currently used for pilot processes and that it will start being used in a continuous way with the producers, and other tools that we already mapped and identified integrated within this compilation of tools and good practices. From all this information that I already shared with Marina regarding the recommendations and challenges derived from them, we bring some conclusions, 5 in specific. The first one regarding traceability, that we identified this weak traceability in the supply chains by the lack of procedures in order to join all these value chain of the commodities, mainly by this main or key stakeholder, that's the producer, and specifically the small stakeholder, that it's completely necessary and important to get to all these socialization to make them aware of the requirements of the regulation and that it will be necessary in order to continue with the commercialization and in such case to widen it to get to the European framework. It is also necessary to invest in the skills development in order to establish this value chain from the producer to the primary commercialization and the secondary commercializator in case that there is one. Not in all cases this happens with this secondary marketer. Geolocation, that is another key element, and that we identified here by the need of development of skills and the use of these tools, as well as for the need of achieving these connections between the value chain in order to allow the producer to have access to the tool as it is itself. This is why all the parts in the chain are important to provide that economic, technical, and other kind of support necessary. Regarding traceability of the raw material in other countries, because it may be that the producer is here, but the product is processed in another Latin country, or the ongoing of the producer is somewhere else, or maybe a diverse location of these factors in the value chain. On the other hand, there's the operational inefficiency and a risk of incompliance. This is regarding the due diligence, where the producer asks for these verifiable information, and we can see the challenge in here that it for the producer, but also the different elements in the value chain, that it will be a challenge that the producer can have these requirements in a verifiable way, or these schemes for verifying verification schemes. It will also need some support and economic technical support from the value chain in regard. Interconnecting platforms with information of custom systems. This is also a key factor in here. We also identify that the regulation now mentions that the relationship can be straight with the European Union custom system, but here we identify that it's key to make this revision from our own custom authorities in order to prevent to get there and maybe get the product returned by some non-compliance, and to not get to these measures in where we can find the product, like product taken, for example, which is a key element. Transparency and information regarding the implementation of forest policies is inefficient. And in our second dialogue, we identified with stakeholders from the CONAP and from Semarnat as well, that there are information systems. However, they are not public, or we don't have access to them from one institution to another. So here's where we are missing this crossover with in sharing information between organizations. The third conclusion that we identified, it's the challenge on implementing procedures, national procedures for the legal framework. As Marina was mentioning, we need to have a clear idea of what are our elements, this list of requirements from the regulation requirements in environmental issues, in human rights issues regarding climate change, so we can identify which are the requirements that have to be aligned to the regulation, and that practically we can have a checklist that can be used as a tool, as an instrument to ensure the compliance by the Mexican supply chain of these 7 commodities. And it is essential to establish effective communication channels to verify the compliance of the regulation that goes aligned with one of the implementations that Marina was saying about the platform where we can have authorities, institutions, organizations representing the different production sectors, the producers themselves, so they can be complemented here and they can be the joint verification of the information. Fourth conclusion, that it's the development of skills for the small producers, that as we already mentioned in the presentation, but it is the key part of the chain that will provide that support to all the product value chain, because that's where it comes from. That's the origin. That's where we have to identify the geolocation and verification of all the information that was requested. And for this, identifying the procedures in a national way that they can be tropicalized in the requirements of the Mexican regulation to the Mexican context. And the last one, that's about improving the communication channels between the authorities in European Union and Mexico, that this project is the initial platform from where we're expecting to have the communication channel open and to keep growing, so we can keep developing this kind of recommendations as it was the pilot program for the benchmark in a national level. So the big picture is these are the conclusions that we are reaching, with which we would like to start the closing panel. And here I would like to invite Lau Vallejo so we can start with this panel and calling our different participants. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the great team from SustainLuum, led by Marina. Thank you very much. And as Anaya was saying, we will invite our panelists, our speakers, led by Lau, Israel Lorenzo Felipe, which is from the ASAER, Marcos Oviedo Mendiola, responsible from AME Café and their funds, Daniel Torres Loza, General Director of Funks Palma, and Mr. Escobar from Econ Mexico, Cocoa and Chocolate. Welcome. I will paraphrase a bit this experience, but I've learned a lot with this project, no doubt about it. So regarding this, I'm here rounded of experts that I would like to ask you, that we have mentioned this in previous dialogues, that we're gonna have a small roundup with I think we have the trigger question, that it's what are the main challenges that you identify from the different areas. We already presented from each organization that are with us. And this is one of the challenges, the main challenges are not the ones that we mentioned. I know that we already made this vision, or the ones that we already mentioned, that as possible, you can take it to a specific case or to an example. Maybe that's what it will be very helpful, because the other thing, I mean, we already have it in the document. And there's always an exact example. For instance, I mean, when Noah was saying about natural disasters, I mean, that exact example where you find a challenge from the organization or company from where you are. So please, let's go with this so we can make it more dynamic, and at the end, we will get it here, okay? So a first challenge that you can see, please, with a specific example, and then we'll have a next follow-up round so we can do it as precise and brief possible. But we cannot stress enough that about the specific example that goes beyond what the document says. I mean, you can say, this happened to me specifically, so please. I think that the main challenge in the government is the effective coordination between the different instances. So I think here we missed CONAFOR, Semarnat, Senacica, and one step before the customs, it could be regarding the health requirements from the ministry. We can establish a filter so it can be a requirement for exporting, at least for the countries of the European Union. So from here, we can see this can be connected with the challenge of the inefficient coordination along with the European Union, because Senacica, in the digital side, they can say, maybe it's not inside my instances, or my regulation has not allowed it, so we need to make adequations. And we need to modify some criteria because, as you mentioned, there are regulations focused from 2015, 2014, or maybe we can visualize this scheme from European Union, and we need to be aware that we need to update some technical criteria that some experts made it, but they are not here anymore. And a very basic, it can be the forest map for the roadmap. So we need to update a decree, we need to make it more flexible, but also something important that it would be a third challenge is how in at the government level we are receptive for innovations and to change our focus on how we've been working now. Because some of you may say, I've been doing deforestation issues, covering these issues, but under these criteria, and I'm the national authority, and this is my process. But right now we need to be proactive and reactive and in legislation of the European Union. And if there are innovations like in internet, artificial intelligence or information available, all these ways like platforms like Wish, like Default, if there are tools like agriculture, how we can make this interoperational in all the systems, because at the end we need to make a concentration and we need to facilitate life for the small producers. So from the Ministry of Agriculture, what we've been looking for is to give compliance to the European Union regulation framework, but also helping the small producers of cocoa and coffee so they can improve their income. Thank you very much. Thank you. You can hear me, right? In the case of the palm oil chain here in Mexico, one of the main challenges is to start the universe of producers that we have in the country. There are almost 7,000 producers, from which more than 6,100, I think, according to the last verification in 2018, along with the 100. They are 6,100 something small producers that gather more than 50% of the supply of fruit from where the palm oil is extracted. So that's the first challenge. There are a lot of small producers, from which 90% of them are producers of less than 20 hectares. So that's a great challenge because you can find producers that have are diversified with different cultivations, so they have 3, 4, 5 hectares, and that their productivity is very low. Their production rates are around 14 tons of recycled-free product, when in Guatemala it's around 30 tons. So the context is very different, and that's the first challenge. The second challenge is that there are these applications, these tools that you've been mentioning, but the thing is the coordination. How we are working in the palm oil sector, we know that Mexico does not export raw palm oil. We are undertaken to this regulation by the main consumers of palm oil in Mexico. We're talking about the main brands, I mean PepsiCo, or well, any of those brands, and most of the traders, all of them are now are subject to the chain, to this regulation. So we are working on that, but the issue is coordination by the large quantity of producers that we have, and because they want to work with the technical teams of the extraction plants on the different grain mills that there are 20 grain mills in Mexico. And the issue here is the complexity that it can have, that's with the dirt challenge. There's a producer that can sell to different extracting plants. I suppose that in coffee and other issues it's the same. So one grinder can have the same information, but the other grinder that also it's selling, I mean, if there are 4 or 5 grinders, the other one needs to have the same information. And that's a challenge to be able to match that information that they come from the polygons. It's not only referentiation, you need to have the polygon. The polygon may vary from plant to plant, the information, the legal information, everything that implies all the recollection of information, the due diligence, all of it has its own problem. So that would be the third challenges in the palm oil industry. Wow, thank you very much, Daniel. That's very important. I will really miss you. Then over here with Donna, and then we close, or as you were saying, not to be, I don't want to be repetitive, but in the work that you have presented, it's very clear recommendations. I have to be honest, I was a little bit pragmatic when you started with these dialogues, because I felt that we were a little bit late as the country in the conditions of the country. So I thank Javier and all the team that pushed around, and with everything that they have achieved. And this takes me to the first challenge to do it in concrete, is the dissemination of information. I think there is a lack of awareness in all the chain. I speak on behalf of Cocoa, but also in other places we don't know what we are facing, right? So we don't know what we are missing, and this is just around the corner from December 30 or December 31st. So this is something that we haven't covered, is the dissemination of this and how we do it in all levels. In 2 levels. First, at the producers level, making more awareness of how we can provide more information, and also regarding that the industry that it's transforming in a finished product that goes to Europe, also to make it aware that all the products can be connected to this, and that they need to have compliance. Specific in the case of chocolate, I think we are exporters and we export mainly to United States in the balance, but I do not know the other products. But in the case of chocolate, even if they export chocolate to Europe, the products or the content you have to prove that they come from the EUDR. So it's also this awareness on the finished products. I think we're still missing something in there. I would say that all this information, if there's a following step, I leave it there also for translating it or to make it brief for public use. I know that you have said that it's in the depository, that it's out there, but I think we're still missing a little bit a further step on how to translate it, how to transfer it, and all the factors and all the institutions that are here. We can share it and help to disseminate it. Following that sense, I think that's the main challenge. The other challenge Israel already mentioned it, and it has been repeated, right? Andres mentioned it as well, Mario mentioned it, regarding governance, how we can coordinate with the government. And unfortunately, I mean, it's very ugly to see that every year we have to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch. But also, Doctor was saying that is an opportunity at the end of the day, right? And the ambassador of the European Union in Mexico, there has been talks in with Claudia Sheinbaum and its administration to start with these. I know you'll see sisters, it comes in a condensed way for the people that should arrive. In order to have this coordination with the different stakeholders, I think that's something that have dueled the country for a very long time, and also by the southwest of the country with this cultivation. So how can we avoid this to be more narrative in this part? And how we can make it change to the producer, to the finished product. And maybe I'm repeating myself, but it's something that we need to solve about governance and to take this reinvention of the wheel of this administration for this term for the new stakeholders. And I think to put it in a regulation and to push all of us. At the beginning, we were complaining about it, not only getting there and giving the rules, and it was not even clear over here, over there. There are a lot of things that have to be done. As a group, we have been solving this, but at the end, we forget to cover this, and sometimes that can help us with the governments. Yeah, I think you have given more than two or three examples, so probably I would just like to ask you to help us closing with some words with these challenges, these concrete challenges that are out there with the participation from McAfee has been very important. And I will probably say it, and maybe he will say that it's kind of challenging because comes with questions and concerns that were very concrete as well, and from the reality of the small producers. So please, and with that, we can wrap up this last part of the panel and our participation. Thank you very much from the Coffee Production Supply Chain Association that represents the non-governmental of the coffee production system. We thank the participation that you have given us in this participation. By on behalf of Luis Herrera, we thank you for the space that you have provided to us, not only in the forums, but also in a direct way to all the product systems that are part of the chain. Our main concern of the product system is the impact that this may have on the small producers regarding the prices that they will be paid to them. And the one that has been with a new regulation, it's the producer. There are ones that are underneath the production cost as it's spot, and it can resent an impact if there's not a coordinated action on this issue for the regulation to so we can have it on the costs for producers. And Israel was saying that I think that the problem with the geolocation, it's not the problem with the coffee producers, as they are producers in most of them less than 4 hectares, which is a reference point that's enough. And that reference point, they already have it established. How to match it with the geolocation systems that they have on forest coverage for soils, that's a responsibility that we would be expect to see covered in the different institutions that have these baselines like Conario, Saber, Conafor, etc. We believe that this wouldn't be a problem because 85% of the producers are small producers of less than five hectares. So it's not a problem for coffee, but it is a problem for producers that are not organized. The organized producers are already working and making geolocations in Chiapas. At this moment, as we speak, we have provided support. Besides the system that we presented here, we have facilitated the systems that we have available all the system, the product systems can start work with geolocation in those moments, in some areas where they don't have it. The problem is traceability here, and for the producers that are a very high percentage, I mean, more than 30% is already organized, and that 30% exports to Europe, but 70% that it's not organized, from the ones that get to buy these large commercialization companies, how they're gonna make this company to guarantee that this coffee that they bought, even by a coyote on field, they will by a dealer, it will do it by the final product identified correctly. We believe that that's traceability issue. In the case of the organizations, they are the users, they are correctly identified, and the users can also be selling to other companies. But the important thing is here how we can verify traceability. That's where we can see the silver problem. Geolocation, I think there are enough tools for this in order to solve it, but the problem is how we can make traceability from these prices in parcels by an intermediate, or these dealers, as we call them, that get to a wet procedure and it's processed, and from there will go to and then to the containers. I mean, how can we give support to that, even if we have identified that that coffee comes from that small field, and then we have the data from that. And we're talking about 500,000, not 700. So that's a challenge that we see it's the most significant. And I would like to thank the support that we have received to receive information in time and shape. In the case of the Ame Cafe website, this information we uploaded from the first time. The links are available in the website since the beginning, and our producers, our production systems are being consulting this information and are available for anyone that needs it as an additional website to do it. And we issued a press release about this for all the production systems and the organizations that are part of it, for them to get to know the problematic that can come and may arise with this implementation.
Thank you very much. When something ends up, other things open up. And Javier told me, like, every time you close a door, more doors open. And well, indeed, we have a lot of homework, the dialogues, and everything else. So what Andres said, I've always been an advocate of these. I was also a public servant, and I understood that it's not in the hands on one sector only. So I want to invite you all to assume this kind of responsibility. Like, we took care of our health during the pandemic. It was not only a responsibility of the government, so it's the same thing here. Sustainability for water issues and other issues as well. And I hope that I can continue with this work, diffusion work, for the next months. It's a commitment that we may have to continue with this. And well, for this, I will give the floor to the Minister Council, and well, I want to thank the colleagues that joined us to the panel and the whole process, and everyone that joined us from Zoom. Everything will keep on going. And thank you very much. Javier, thank you very much as well. And well, as Laura said, these will go on. The song says this is not the end of the road, and so it is, so that we have a lot of work left to do. And I want to close this cycle of workshops and work with a message of constructive optimism, hope, and we need to share a lot. And this message that I will share with you can be wrapped up in a phrase that you all know. Many of you have said that before, actually. We will be hoping for the best, but we will be preparing for the worst. So since we have to be prepared for the worst, then we will be in that combat terrain, activity, actions. And well, today we've seen a lot of ways to carry on with that action. We've seen a lot of proposals with very interesting recommendations. And well, we've talked about preparing the projects and looking for the options where they are to try to find this training, try to collaborate very closely with all of the levels of government and civil society. And there are many things that can be done. And well, we should get everything, all the meat in the grill, or well, the onions in the grill. I don't know if you rather onions, you're a vegetarian perhaps, but well, that's just a figure of speech. Let's act now. And from the European Union, we want to continue to support you. We have a series of programs and projects, several of them. And of course, the water topic and forest topics will be our priority. We have a cooperation framework within our European Program of Investments Level Gateway with a new administration, but also with all of the actors and so on for civil society. There are a lot of things that we can work on together. So cheer up and well, let's get to work. Thank you everyone for being here, for following us, and thank you so much for the two teams that join us with this project, Regina, Gloria, all your untireable teams, and Laura, of course. Thank you so much. And well, also I want to thank the authorities that have followed us, who has been hanging on till the end, and she is a very dignified representative of the federal government and from the state governments. We've had also authorities in this from the state governments here in the workshop. So thank you, everyone, and well, we will continue fighting.